The chapter starts with a knight named Diaz, completely still, admiring the vastness of the land. He tells us that in the territory given to him, there's only grass. He mentions that about a month ago, he was forced into a carriage from the capital. Once they arrived, the coachman told him to get out, and we learned that Diaz is an orphan, and they thought a desolate field would be perfect for him. Who would think of that? But before leaving, he hands him the map outlining his territory along with the inventory given by His Majesty. This prairie is called Nesros, and from today on, the knight will be known as Diaz Nesros. With that, the carriage leaves and Diaz strolls through his territory. He tells us that His Majesty granted him this land as a reward for his service in the war. He has no idea what to do with it. He was just sent there with his weapons, and his only duty is to live there, protect his people, collect money, and give it to the king. After this, he goes to drink some water. Luckily, the river water is clean, unlike the muddy water he drank during the war. Despite walking a lot, he hasn't seen a single living being, just endless grass that isn't even good for eating. By nightfall, he thinks about what he can do. If things don't improve, he considers going to a village to find work to help people, as that was his parents' last wish. That's how he falls asleep, but when morning comes, he's awakened by a girl asking who he is and what he's doing there. He replies that his name is Diaz and he's here because he has no bed. His serious answer makes the girl think he's an idiot. Diaz doesn't deny it, mentioning he didn't receive an education. The girl asks about his purpose and he replies that he was sent here and his current goal is to survive. His honesty makes the girl doubt him, so Diaz explains better. He wants to fulfill his parents' wish and protect the weak, that's his only goal. At that moment, the girl's horn starts to glow, apparently because Diaz spoke the truth. She asks if he's her ally or enemy, but he replies he doesn't know since he just met her. This annoys the girl, demanding he be clearer. Diaz doesn't understand her anger, but it's clear to him that if this is her territory and she's part of his people, she would naturally be upset about not knowing who he is. So he answers that he is her ally, swearing to protect her no matter who he faces. This makes the horn shine even brighter. Diaz doesn't understand what's happening, but they take him away without any explanation. Yes, poor Diaz, they don't tell him anything. Thus, they bring him to a village where everyone is amazed to see him, while Diaz can't believe he hadn't seen them before. It's there that they introduce him to the tribe leader. She asks Alna, the girl, if she saw any red color, to which she replies it glowed a bright blue. From what she's heard, the leader asks Diaz if, being an ally of Anna, he will also be her ally. He replies that they are, including the whole village, explaining that the king ordered him to come to these lands to be their lord. However, upon hearing this, Alna points her bow at him. The leader asks her to lower it as she still wants to talk to Diaz, requesting he tell her from the beginning how the king ordered that. Diaz's story begins when he became aware of reason and when his parents were still alive. His mother always said to find a job that helps people, and his father told him to be strong to defend the weak. Those were their last wishes, as both died from an epidemic, and Diaz was left alone at the age of 10. However, he joined other orphans, and they earned money by cleaning the city or hunting weak monsters. So far, Diaz has lived fighting to fulfill that last wish. At 15, the war broke out and enemy soldiers quickly arrived at a neighboring village. Without hesitation, he enlisted in the army to defend everyone. It wasn't until that day that he became aware of his talent for fighting and won several battles. The war ended 20 years later, and at the age of 35, His Majesty granted him this territory. After hearing his story, the elder recognizes him as someone willing to protect his people, but still asks him a question. What would he do if they weren't his people? If he would be their ally? Diaz replies that naturally they would be neighbors in the same prairie, so he would help them if they had problems. At that moment, the elder's horn starts to glow, and nodding with a smile, Alma lowers her weapon. Confused by all this, Diaz questions why they asked him that, since those who live there are supposed to be his people. But as he says this, he realizes something. The elder, seeing that he understood, confirms that they are not his people. On the contrary, they are enemies of his king who have been fighting against his kingdom for many years. Upon hearing this, Diaz reflects. Yes, poor Diaz. They left him in dangerous territory. But then the elder suggests they might not be his enemies, as he is blue, which is very unusual, meaning they should be able to get along. With that said, she asks him to look up and listen. She introduces herself as Mal, the leader of the Oni tribe, and explains that they have long fought against his kingdom for control of this prairie. She recounts that 50 years ago, the Oni lost a great battle and had to flee. She then asks how they live here if they ran away. The elder reveals that by gathering mana in their horns, they can cast various spells, including concealment, which allows them to hide the entire village and erase their presence. Diaz realizes this is why he couldn't find them the day before, but then he asks if it's really wise to share this with someone from the enemy kingdom. Maul makes it clear she wouldn't have if he weren't blue, and she reveals there's a spell called Soul Evaluation, which has 3 colors. Red indicates danger or enmity, white is harmless, and blue represents someone who brings blessings. If he lies even a little, it turns red, but that never happened with him, so she's convinced he's an honest fool. Yes, it's an insult, but a flattering one, which is surprising since she hasn't seen anyone like him reach this age while fulfilling their parents' last wishes. Diaz decides to take it as a compliment, though he's not sure. The elder mentions she's been praising him for a while, and putting jokes aside, she says she'll give him her full support to become a great feudal lord. She clarifies they won't be part of his people, but they'll provide him with shelter and food, even some livestock. In return, she asks him not to tell anyone about the existence of this village, especially not the king. Diaz reassures her not to worry. After all, he has nothing against them. As long as they don't seek conflict with the kingdom, he doesn't mind them living there. The elder informs him that Alma will be with him to help for a while, so they'll live together and she'll teach him about life here. Alma starts shouting, asking what that means. The elder reminds her that she brought him, so she must take responsibility. With no other choice, Alma reluctantly agrees. We then see both of them in front of their new home. Diaz is amazed that as soon as they arrived, the other Oni were already finishing their house. Alma explains that when danger threatens their concealment, they dismantle the houses and flee, which is why they live in these structures called yurts. After the others finish the house, Diaz and Alma sit down to talk. She informs him that later they'll bring food and livestock. A bit confused, Diaz asks what that last part means. Alma explains that it's the livestock and adds that if he breeds the pair and increases the herd, he'll have stables. Diaz thanks her for the information, then asks if she could teach him how to grow his village. Hearing this, Alma's expression changes as she questions if he thinks she knows how. She also wonders why he would want subjects in his current state, as he only has 1 yurt and food for himself. Clearly, Diaz feels a bit down, but then Alma hands him a sack of matabi powder, a product that, when spread around, will attract beasts. Depending on how many he hunts, he can get another yurt. We see our protagonist in the middle of nowhere throwing the entire sack and spreading the powder. After that, he patiently waits for the monsters to arrive, hearing a stampede of buffalo approaching. Without any fear, Diaz wields his axe and begins to slaughter the monsters. Here we discover that his fighting style is to follow his instincts and swing his axe with force. After finishing off the stampede, he regrets only having hunted half the herd, but he realizes a problem. He has no way to carry so many at once. Later in the afternoon, while returning with a buffalo, he thinks that Alma will surely scold him for fighting like a madman and not thinking about how to transport them, and yes, he is an idiot. Upon arriving at the village, he's surprised to find a black guy in his first house. However, Diaz tells her he took down many more but couldn't find a way to bring them. Almost scared, he asks how many he killed, revealing it was between 30 and 40, an almost impossible amount to achieve. With this, Diaz earns the respect of Alma and the leader by proving his manhood, so they call the other men to help bring in all the beasts Diaz has hunted, marking the first time they refer to him by name. In all this, he asks the leader what exactly manhood is, to which she replies it's a man's worth in knowing how to work and provide. Diaz understands a bit, but he asks how that relates to Alma being in a good mood. The leader mentions that as an adult, it's natural for her to be happy about such manhood. Diaz wonders if that makes him more attractive, even if he's not handsome or smooth-talking. The leader responds that those are silly things, as beauty doesn't feed anyone, and yes, a huge fact. Anything unrelated to manhood has no value for a woman in the tribe. Since Alma is beautiful and hardworking, her greatest gift would be to marry her, to which Diaz nervously replies he has no intention of doing so. The next day, he wakes up to find Alma made him breakfast. He mentions how delicious it is, making Alma blush, and he does too. Changing the subject, Alma asks what he's hunting today. Even though he brought a lot of food yesterday, he needs a well and latrines if he wants to gather people here, since he can't pay for the houses. That said, Diaz was thinking of hunting more black geese, but Alma suggests it's not wise to bring the same thing all the time, proposing they hunt monsters today. However, Diaz mentions their meat is inedible due to the miasma, but their claws, horns, and magical stones are very valuable. Alma tells him there aren't many monsters around, but she can find them with her magic, suggesting they hunt together. At first, Dia refuses because it's too dangerous, but Alma convinces him with her enthusiasm. Later, we see Dia grooming the bay, as their wool is worth more than their meat. The men arrive with the supplies he requested, but unlike before, they come happily to talk to Diaz, all because of his great manliness. Then Alda comes out of the house changed for hunting, surprising everyone with how different she looks, plus she leaves the men in charge of the bee to spend the whole day with Diaz. Yes, that's quite bold, I think. At that moment, Diaz feels the hateful glares from the other men, so he asks them to hurry up and go hunting. We then move to a rocky place. Diaz asks if this spot is the best. Alna tells him not to worry, she'll handle the search. With that, we see her casting a spell, and after a few seconds, she detects a large monster in the distance. Fearing for Alma's safety, Diaz asks her to wait there while he takes a look. Alna reassures him, reminding him he can use concealment, promising they'll flee together if it turns out to be too strong. Though doubtful, Diaz eventually agrees. When he reaches the monster, Alna is stunned to see it's a land dragon. However, our protagonist sees it as just a simple turtle, so he goes to strike it, but when he does, his weapon cracks. Realizing it's quite tough, he aims for its head. However, the turtle hides, blocking its weak points. Alma, from a distance, shouts for Diaz to run away, but our protagonist refuses, climbing onto the turtle's shell and continuing to attack. After a while of hitting it, his axe cracks even more, but that's not a problem, as Diaz immediately repairs it. Seeing this, Alma is amazed. Here, Diaz tells us he got that axe after defeating a shogun from a neighboring country, and that it, besides being shaped like a lion, can repair minor damage if he wishes, so he keeps attacking the monster until he gets a bit tired. When he looks back at Alna, she seems affected by the monster's miasma. Worried for her safety, Diaz considers going home, so he delivers the final blow, and this time he breaks the shell. At that moment, the dragon reveals itself and charges a fireball, but Diaz stops it by slicing part of its neck. We see him dodge the monster's attacks until suddenly one of the fireballs hits Alna. Seeing that she's the target, Diaz immediately jumps, and remembering his vow to protect her, he uses all his strength to finish off the monster. After defeating the massive creature, Alna runs to hug Diaz in tears, and while in his arms, she tells him she will marry him. Two villagers sent by the leader arrive at the fight scene, as she asks to find the couple since it got late, ending up with the marriage proposal. After this, they all bring the land dragon back, announcing that Diaz defeated it. He asks if it's really that impressive, but Mole arrives to praise his great feat. Diaz asks if this is enough for a well and a latrine, to which the leader replies that one leg is enough to build a lot. Even the value of that turtle is greater than what the village can offer. What they can provide in return is to butcher the beast, plus the well, the latrine, materials for yurts, provisions, and medicinal herbs. Yes, all of that was brought by the dragon, and Diaz thinks it's perfect, until Maul mentions that the rest of the beast will be Alna's wedding gift. Diaz is taken aback by this and asks what she means, repeating that he will marry her whether he likes it or not. After all, having a neighbor capable of killing dragons isn't too scary, so it's better to have good ties, adding that this has proven his great manliness, so if he doesn't marry Alna, another woman might come for him, as is happening right now. Anyway, Alnaya went to talk to her parents, so he doesn't have many options. Diaz asks if they could settle for a commitment instead, but the Oni aren't used to that. However, he can choose when to marry. Besides, the sooner they strengthen their ties, the easier it will be to support his role as a great lord. Diaz asks why it matters so much to form a bond, explaining that a lord like him is rare, since the last one was an idiot who died recently from an illness. With that, he wishes him luck, and Diaz asks some villagers how old Alna is, finding out she's 15 and can marry, which means he could almost be her father. Plus, the minimum age in the kingdom is 18, so he decides to marry her in 3 years, enough time to become a great lord. While he thinks this, Alna arrives saying they reached an agreement and asks what he wants to eat. He replies whatever she wants, and suddenly, he finds himself at a buffet with the whole family. Everyone is happy for the good man Alma found, while Diaz insists it's just an engagement. Days later, we learn he now has his 4 wells and the latrine, so he can finally receive guests. But now the big question arises. Where will he find people? Alma steps in, announcing she detected a monster to the north. It's not a big one, but since it's heading their way, Diaz decides to take it out before it arrives, and Alna, of course, will go too. However, they fear that if they see them, they'll get scared and run away, but some villagers arrive and they leave this to them. So we move on to the monster, which turns out to be an ogre. Alda thinks they should let it go, but knowing it's coming towards them, they have no choice. Both rush toward the monster. Alda shoots an arrow and Diaz tries to get closer, but the creature is quite agile. In response, Alma immobilizes it with an arrow to the foot, allowing Diaz to reach it and finish it off. When they finish off the monster, Alma goes to congratulate him, but while they talk, she smells the ogre's disgusting odor on him, so she sends him to bathe and clean his armor. The next day, our protagonist reflects on what happened yesterday, wondering how he'll get more subjects, But then Alma appears with good news. Francois is pregnant. Hearing this, he immediately goes to the pen to congratulate the little one, but when he does, Francie gets jealous and joins in. Alma mentions that not everything is good. She reminds him that the bees are quite intelligent and understand human language, which makes them sensitive during pregnancy as they get overwhelmed with fear. As a result, they end up dying, so to prevent that, the strongest of the flock must stay by their side, meaning both bees will have to sleep in the yurt, which will inevitably make it dirty and smell bad. She explains how some men hate that and can't stand it. After hearing all this, Diaz tells her it's no problem. After all, Francis and Franzua are an important part of his family. Seeing his big heart, Alma smiles and says he's the best husband. At that moment, the bees start talking to Alma, who gets embarrassed, saying they haven't done anything yet. Diaz understands perfectly what they're talking about, so he just covers his face. Then, Alma's horn begins to glow. She tells Diaz there are humans with horses. Diaz decides to take a look, asking her to use concealment. On the way there, he wonders if they might be enemies, in which case he'll have to be careful until, at that moment, a knight recognizes him, and seeing him, Diaz calls out Klaus. They're both happy to see each other, and Diaz asks what brings them here, to which Klaus explains he came as an escort for that lady who seems to have a matter with him. However, Diaz doesn't know her, and Klaus asks him to host them in his mansion to rest. So, we arrive at his humble little house. Diaz tells us he requested to hide the village except for his house to keep the Oni secret and avoid explanations. The maid thanks him for receiving her and introduces herself as the third Princess Diane, asking if his mansion is still under construction since she doesn't see a servant. Diaz confidently calls her by her name, infuriating a guard for not addressing her as Your Highness. However, Diane is fine with it. Diaz replies he only has this house that he worked hard to build, which surprises Diane, who asks what happened to the builders, since supposedly the king gave him a reward and funds to settle down, but Diaz mentions he didn't receive a single coin as they left him here with no water or food. Hearing this shocks everyone and angers Klaus. At that point, Diaz asks what brought them here to force her to travel for a whole month, to which Diane replies it's about war. She explains there are rumors of a new conflict in the capital and came to ask for help from Diaz, the hero who saved the kingdom, and as a reward, she offers her hand or that of Phoenicia or Meralda, the guards accompanying her. However, Diaz isn't interested in any of this, as he's very happy with his BAs, and marrying a stranger doesn't appeal to him, stating he won't go back to any war. He also can't send troops, as he has no servants, as you can see. Diane, annoyed, asks him to reconsider, but it's a firm no. The guard from before stands up angrily at his disrespect, but when he draws his sword, Diane breaks it, leaving the hand of the overly friendly guard quite numb. If there's nothing more to say, he tells them to leave. Klaus immediately agrees, knowing they could never beat the kingdom's great hero. Dia stands up, furious, and leaves. Dia stays in the yurt, thinking about how to fix that hole, fearing Alna will scold her. Meanwhile, Diane is furious for being rejected, vowing they will regret it one day. As she watches them leave, Alna appears beside her, saying one soldier was deep blue and the others red and white. Our protagonist is surprised to see them appear out of nowhere and asks how long they've been there. Alna replies that they approached with concealment because she was sad. Hearing this, Diaz pets the veins apologetically, but Alma gets jealous and gives him some affection too. She then asks if being red means they are hostile. Alma replies no, as she now feels the same for both, since they are family. Diaz doesn't argue and agrees, but then wonders if the deep blue soldier was Klaus. Alma then asks what he plans to do about the hole in the ground. In response, Dia apologizes and says she will fix it. The next day, Dia wakes up as usual and sees Alna preparing breakfast. Suddenly, her horn starts to glow, signaling the arrival of a human. The protagonist decides to investigate, but Alma and the bees end up accompanying him. When they arrive, he finds Klaus, who greets him in somewhat different clothing. Diaz asks what happened to his armor, and Klaus tells him he was dismissed from the army. Diaz asks if it was his fault. Klaus replies no, he got himself dismissed on purpose, and now he wants to work for him as a soldier. Diaz considers accepting this. After all, he's someone he can trust in battle, but still asks Alna for her opinion. She appears behind him and says she has no problem since his color was blue all along. With Alna's approval, Diaz has no issue accepting him, but first asks him to come home, and that's how Diaz got his first subject. Days passed, and Cloud is training. He tells us that during the 10 days there, he learned to build a yurt with Diaz's help and received gear made from dragon materials, something even royalty couldn't get. He promises to meet their expectations. Yeah, Klaus is a great guy. In the afternoon, the three enjoy Alna's cooking. Klaus, taking the first bite, praises how delicious it is, assuring that Alna will make an excellent wife. Hearing this, our 40-something gets nervous while Alna offers more food. As they chat comfortably with Klaus, who promises to give his best as captain, Alna's horn starts glowing green. Diaz directly asks how many there are. Alna replies there are 12 to the east and they are all humans, but one is too weak. Diaz decides to go with Alna and the bees, leaving Klaus as the protector, who watches in amazement as everyone disappears with that magic. He then remembers the royal capital is in that direction, and since the 5 princes and princesses are currently fighting for succession, the effects of their conspiracies reach even the border, so it's only a matter of time before the conflict arrives here. After a while, Diaz returns with several elderly women and they all help. After addressing their needs, Klaus asks what happened. Diaz explains that due to a rebellion from a neighboring domain, the elderly were expelled to reduce the number of mouths to feed. Yes, all of them are scoundrels. Klaus immediately assumes the culprits are from Castex as he saw their terrible state on the way. Diaz sets that aside and mentions that Grandma Maya is the leader, and thanks to her divination, they were able to find them. Our protagonist becomes very happy as he now has more subjects, so he immediately prepares the yurts. Klaus initially disagrees, but after some words from Alna, he reconsiders, remembering how during an enemy attack, only Diaz stayed to protect the civilian refugees and, despite the conflict, saved a child, leaving him with the other refugees, promising to protect him no matter what. All the enemies were approaching. Diaz's only instruction to Klaus was to stay alive, and he did just that. Klaus doesn't remember much from that night. His only thought was to save people and support Diaz. The battle didn't end until dawn, successfully protecting the shelter. With this memory, he realizes that Diaz is still the same and will support him in becoming a great lord. That's how they managed to build several latrines and a hall where the women will spin wool. Now, with many more people, Diaz thinks of declaring this place a village, but he can't come up with a name. Alda suggests Illic Village, meaning first village, and they settle on that name. And yes, it's not bad. What name would you give it? But moving on, with the meeting over, they head home, though there are still subjects missing. Diaz mentions the idea from Grandma Maya, and just then she appears. The idea was to sell dragon materials and buy slaves, but Diaz hates slavery. In battle, he had seen slaves as soldiers, and they were in terrible condition, at least in his village. Slavery is forbidden, but Grandma Maya also hates it. However, she wanted to test Diaz, knowing his stance on it, since in Castex they only heard cruel stories. She tells us that her lord and family enjoyed hunting slaves. The second son started the war and had several slaves in his possession, but Diaz won't allow that to happen in Iluk. One day, Alna called a traveling merchant who knows the Oni village, but he turns out to be a frog named Pejin Do. Hope they pronounced it right. He tells us he's from the frogman race and asks to see the dragon material. When they saw it, Diaz and Klaus were as surprised as I was, but they notice he is peaceful, so they show him the material, which also surprises Pejin, who asks if he really won it alone. Seeing he didn't trust him, Diaz cuts the shell in half. After unloading the items, he also orders them to bring that out. The bear men show 2 small elves. Seeing this, Diaz gets furious, as he no longer sees the spark of a child in their eyes. Alma calms him down, and along with the elder, they tell Pejin they aren't interested in buying slaves. Realizing the misunderstanding, Pejin clarifies that they aren't slaves but refugees he had to take as goods, or else they would die. He explains that in the village where they were born, they hate twins because they bring misfortune, so they were going to execute them at birth, but their parents fled with them. However, the journey took a toll, and both parents fell ill, so they asked him to take care of them. He refused, but when they offered to pay him to take them as goods, he had no choice but to accept. Kneeling before our protagonist, he begs him to buy them, as he is in the red and can't support them anymore. Alma confirms that everything is true and that these girls are deep blue. Seeing they pose no danger, Diaz agrees to take them in and offers to pay for the materials used so far. Immediately, Pejin seals the deal and leaves the place. With the girls in his care, Diaz picks them up and starts asking questions, including their names, but none respond. In response, he thinks of giving them names. When they hear this, the little ones shout that they don't want that. So, Diaz asks them their names again. The one on the left reveals her name is Senai, while the other is Ian. Knowing this, Diaz sends them to bathe with Alna. Seeing how he handled the situation, Klaus acknowledges it was impressive. Diaz tells him he's used to it, as before the war he often acted as a father to other orphans. Yes, what a nice guy. After the bath, Diaz notices the girls still don't trust him, but now he just needs to know their names. However, Grandma Maya knows these girls aren't human, so she'll keep an eye on what happens. Alda gives each sister a medallion and tells us that Zenai means beautiful as the moon and Eon means sacred moon, and the medallions have the power of the moon. The sisters cry as they remember how their parents called them that. Diaz tells them they've been very strong and encourages them to cry as much as they need. The bees also help calm them, and Diaz asks Alna about the language used for their names. It's an ancient language with only legends left, but now she doubts the Oni are the only ones who kept it, so the girl's race might be linked to the Oni. From that day on, the Eluk village became noisier. 10 days have passed and the sisters have gained more trust, but Alda senses someone approaching. Diaz goes to check immediately, and now the sheep can stay with the sisters, who ask him to return soon. The light from this person is white, and he introduces himself as Camelot, servant of Eldon, the new lord of Kasdek, who wants to meet Diaz. He agrees without hesitation but won't let someone like him enter Iluk, and then he sees a young man with a carriage and ladies who looks at him with a sly smile. That's when Alana comments that Kasdek shines with a deep blue, not as much as Deus, but quite a bit, and so does his army. Suddenly, Kasdek steps down from the carriage and goes to apologize to Deus, saying he wanted to meet him in person because he's an admirer and introduces himself as Eldon Kaslex. Eldon tells him he's heard 100 stories about him and came to foster a good relationship. Diaz is amazed by this and apologizes for how he treated the Camelots. Eldon replies not to worry and asks about the young woman who accompanied him, noting he could sense her with his smell and hearing. Both are surprised that the concealment didn't work, so Alana becomes visible. Seeing her horn, Eldon asks Diaz what race she is, to which Alana firmly replies that she is his wife, and that's it. Yes, she's making her point. Eldon asks if she is a half-human. Alana replies that she is from the Oni tribe but doesn't know the term half-human. Eldon explains that they are races with human traits, like the frog merchant, so Alana responds that she could be. For some reason, Eldon starts to cry and asks Diaz if he has had children with Alna. Nervously, Diaz replies no, although Alna admits she wants to have 10. Yes, this girl really has no limits, and she tells Eldon that Diaz is raising 2 orphans who look like half-humans. This makes Eldon burst into tears, and then his body takes the form of an elephant, exclaiming to his mother that he finally found an ally. Diaz is astonished that he could lift him and asks if he is a half-human. However, at that moment, Eldon collapses. After this, they take him to his bed, and he asks Camelot what happened, and it turns out Eldon is a half-human, the child of a half-human and a human. He can be both, but changing forms exhausts him too much. Half-humans are rare, and being one is an advantage for Eldon, but not being able to just be brings him problems, which is why his wives take good care of him, as he's more prone to change when he's emotional. Diaz tells him not to worry about that and asks about that rebellion. Eldon replies it was to protect his people. It all started when he was born. The previous Lord Enkars already had a wife and child, but he was worse than his father, so Enkars marginalized him and chose Eldon, recognizing him as his son and giving him status and authority. Until he was 5, he thought he was human, and one day he discovered what he was. Plus, he treated his mother like a slave. The butler adds that since then, Lord Eldon and his mother met in secret. He dedicated himself to protecting half-humans from the shadows without Enkars, a fervent supporter of slavery, noticing. Additionally, he adds that his wives were also slaves, but Eldon saved them, and due to his ideals, they ended up sincerely falling in love with him. Alna asks about the rumor circulating about him. The butler explains that they intentionally spread that rumor, but the truth is that they all love each other genuinely. Alma is fascinated by this, but the butler adds that it wasn't easy to maintain that deception, as even King Enkard found out and immediately ordered the execution of all half-humans in the domain, along with Eldon. But Eldon raised an army to protect the half-humans and defeated him. Eldon apologizes for earlier, but explains he was very excited to hear that the family of the hero he admires is half-human, so he thought they would be comrades with the same dream. Before continuing, Diaz asks if by hero he means him. Eldon confirms this, mentioning the story he heard about the hero Salvador Diaz. The butler explains that it refers to honoring his parents' last wish, helping the weak, annihilating 1,000 enemies, and reforming tyrannical nobles with a firm hand, and that they even performed it in a play. Hearing all this, Diaz is stunned, as he doesn't dismiss that much of it might be made up. For all these reasons, Eldon asks him again to have a good relationship and work together to create a world for the semi-humans. Diaz agrees to support his dream. After all, in his village, they already live in peace, so he formally asks to be friends. Hearing these words from his idol, Eldon can't help but cry. Later, the two catch up on their domains, and Eldon, noticing Diaz's interest in gaining subjects, advises him to first stock up on food, as winter is not far off, and if he doesn't prepare, he'll face problems later. Diaz thanks him for the advice, and that wraps up the meeting. When they return home, the little ones greet them with shouts. They complain about the delay and, in tears, hit him until they tire. That night, while the little ones sleep, Alma talks to Diaz about the twins' behavior, asking if he shouldn't have scolded them for hitting him and demanding to stay up late. Naya confirms that he should have, but considering he broke his promise, he was the one who needed to apologize first. It's also their way of testing the adults they just met, and she'll let it slide this time, as not scolding them could spoil them. Alana feels happy about this, and they discuss food. Alana was about to mention something about that, but her horn glows again, and she says she sensed several intruders. Diaz suspects they are bandits, so he decides to take a look. Alana will join him, as it will be hard to find them at night, and they leave Klaus to watch the girls. Diaz agrees to her going, and they head out immediately to see what's happening. At the site, they see several people with torches. Apparently, the one in the red hood hired them, and they came at night to ambush Diaz because no one could defeat him in broad daylight, and if he spots them, they are as good as dead. The bandit leader replies that those are exaggerated rumors, adding that with so many men, it's impossible for them to lose. The contractor gets angry at his overconfidence, also mentioning that if Eldon is here, he'll give 100 silver coins to whoever kills him and 10 gold coins for killing Diaz. The leader gets excited and tells everyone to prepare, because when they return home, they'll be rich. But then an arrow falls from the sky and hits one of the men. Everyone ducks as more arrows keep falling. At the same time, they shoot arrows at the red light they saw. It goes out for a moment, but every arrow they shoot hits a target. The leader orders them to keep shooting and hears someone groaning. Immediately, they all surround him, but Diaz comes out with his sword. No one knows what's happening in this darkness, and they try to regroup, but Diaz takes them down effortlessly. The leader sees the green light from Alana's horn and runs to locate her, but Diaz appears in front of him, cutting his sword. For a moment, he sees him and recognizes Diaz, saying that facing this monster isn't worth even 100 gold coins. In a scene change, we see the one in the red hood escaping the forest, but just when he thinks he's gotten away, a sharp pain in his groin makes him scream. The guy curses Diaz for doing this to him, as we learn that in the past, taking advantage of his noble status, he did something wrong, and Diaz, furious, hit him with all his strength there. Just remembering this fills the guy with tremendous rage, swearing that he will kill him. Now we return to our protagonist, who after defeating the bandits, lines them up and, as punishment, banishes them from his domain. As they watch them leave, Alma asks if it was really right to give them such a light punishment. Diaz replies that it was. After all, they didn't suffer any harm, although he admits that when that arrow grazed him, he boiled with rage, but next time, he won't hold back. Changing the subject, Alma mentions that at least they got a good haul, which they can melt down to make many tools. On the way home, Alma tells him that her family was never wealthy, so her dream was always to hunt a group of bandits like now. However, it's unusual for them to come to this prairie. She admits that when she saw him arrive in his carriage, she got excited thinking he would finally defeat the bandits, but he ended up being left out in the open, and when she saw him again the next morning, he was sleeping very peacefully. She admits that at first she thought of killing him and taking his axe and armor. Hearing this story, Diaz is shocked. That's when Alda wonders why she decided to talk to him. She doesn't know yet, but thanks to that, she has her current life, so she doesn't think it was a bad decision. After saying this, she uses her ability to become invisible, and approaching Diaz, kisses him on the cheek, but instantly feels embarrassed and runs away. Diaz chases her, confessing along the way that thanks to her, he can keep moving forward. After all, she lights up his darkness. One morning, Diaz meets with Maul to discuss wanting to grow a garden. He mentions he talked to Alna, but she only said it could be done in pots. Mole confirms this and reveals that, for some reason, crops don't grow in that prairie. Diaz just asks him to teach him how to plant in pots, which Mole agrees to easily. He takes out a fertilizer stone, telling him to crush it with bone and mix it with soil, but clarifies it only works for herbs, not vegetables. Diaz asks the difference, and Mole replies he doesn't know but assumes the forest people do. When Diaz asks who they are, Mole explains it's a village living in the forest that knows everything about plants and gardens. They say if they wave their hands, any wasteland turns green, but he's not sure if it's true, just rumors. He promises they'll help with the garden, but expects him to teach them how to do it if it goes well. Diaz agrees without hesitation. After all, that was his intention. Maul is happy to hear this, saying he expects a lot from him, and of course hopes he has children with Alna. Yes, a bit too soon. Upon hearing this, Diaz turns pale, especially when the old woman offers him some herbs that might help. Later, Diaz returns home and is greeted by the twins, who ask what he has in his hand. Diaz proudly shows the stones, but the twins are disappointed, thinking they're just rocks, and go off to play with the bees. At that moment, Alna appears asking about the rocks. Diaz picks one up, saying they look like beautiful jewels to him. Alna assumes that's normal. After all, he can't sense mana, since anyone using magic would see those stones are nothing special. Knowing this, Diaz asks if Zenai and Ion can notice it too. Alna confirms this, revealing they can even sense mana that she can't, so she's sure they'll one day be better mages than the tribe leader. In a scene change, Diaz is crushing the fertilizer stones when Alma arrives, warning that something is approaching from the east. Diaz prepares to check it out, but Alna accompanies him as always. Yes, he never leaves Diaz's side. When they reach a certain point, Diaz pulls out the spyglass and discovers it's Camelot, Elnon's servant, with white creatures behind him. Elnon realizes the strange reaction was due to the white geese. He also notices something moving inside the cart, so they plan to ask what he brought. Inside the cart, we find small rodents. One of them sits thinking about how lucky he was to escape from the hunters, as he can now return to the desert. Then, another rodent yells that he's wrong, as they are actually heading to the Dragon Slayer to take him down and restore honor to the desert people. Hearing this, the little one tries to reason with him, reminding him that that guy killed a dragon by himself. The other rodents shout that means nothing, as it's probably a dirty lie, so now they'll defeat him and make him give them food and transport to the desert. After all, that was the strategy that hooded figure gave them. Yes, they won't live long. Gamelok stops the cart and gets out to greet Diaz and Elna, mentioning he brought the items that Lord Eldon promised them. Inside the cart, the rats recognize Diaz and are ready to attack, but the good rat asks them not to. Just then, Diaz is about to ask something, but hears a thud on the cart, and as he approaches, the little creatures jump and attack him. Immediately, Elna hits each one with a stick, but doesn't kill them, as they might belong to Camelot. However, the rats respond that they belong to no one and insult her, demanding she respect the desert people. Diaz strikes them with his axe for daring to insult her, which embarrasses Alna. Then Camelot asks the guards to protect the lords and capture the mice. After a while, they are caught and put into a bag. Camelot apologizes for the commotion, explaining they are subjects of his domain. Though they may not seem like it, they are beastmen, as they have culture and speak, so they are also semi-humans. This reminds Diaz of what he was told as a child. With that, the words are wisdom given to us by God, and that's why only people can speak. The rats are known as ear-twitching jumping mice, though they prefer desert people, as they live in a desert far from the kingdom, yes, because more, but were captured as slaves. Eldon promised to bring them home when they have authority, but those little creatures told him to go to hell. Upon hearing this, Diaz accepts Camelot's apology and looks at the list of supplies Eldon sent. Besides farming tools, he sent spices and products from his domain, and they can keep the cart and horses for trade, along with materials for a stable the guards will build, all for free. Diaz feels indebted and considers giving them the dragon materials as thanks. Alma then asks if they will really give them the horses. Diaz confirms this by pointing to them. Immediately, Alma runs to pet them and then hugs our protagonist, telling him he's the best husband. Yes, at that age, they are quite something. In the afternoon, while returning home, Alma tells Diaz that her family wasn't wealthy, so during her childhood, she always dreamed of having a family with horses, and now that she has it, she's very happy. Diaz asks if there's a specific reason her family was poor, and Alda confesses her older brother is useless. That's how her brother-in-law is. Putting that aside, she apologizes to our protagonist for earlier and asks if he's upset about her reaction. Diaz reassures her, saying if it's her, he has no problem, though he prefers she controls herself a bit around others. The next morning, Diaz and Klaus start plowing the land. After a tiring day, they finally finish preparing the soil and take a break with the elderly women. While they were chatting, one elderly woman mentions that in her village they used ash to prepare the soil, but she hopes this fertilizer will be enough. The other elderly woman suggests digging a cistern so they can use it if the stream dries up in summer. Diaz and Klaus agree to do this. After all, they have experience with war. Just then the twins arrive asking if they finished the garden. Diaz replies no, it will take a few more days, then asks if they need anything. The twins tell him the food is ready and that Alma is calling him. Before Diaz very proudly thanks him, but notices his gaze at the garden. On their way home, the little ones ask if it's hard to have a garden. Diaz says not at all, so one asks if he would be sad if the garden doesn't work out. Diaz replies not at all, as he's just trying things out. As a final question, they ask if he would be sad if they were hiding something from him. Diaz answers he would be if it's something bad, but if not, he sees no problem with them keeping a secret. Upon hearing this, the little ones felt relieved and jumped down from his arms, running home. Later that night, Diaz asked Alna if she knew anything about Zenai and Ayan's questions, but she denied knowing anything. After a few days, they were back to normal and forgot about it. Now they can plant the medicinal herb seeds called yamoshi, which grows so fast they sprout the next day. After planting them, Diaz is amazed they finished the stable in 3 days, and Gamelot tells him they were prefabricated, so they just put the pieces together. Even though Eldon said everything was free, Diaz couldn't just leave it at that, so he packs some boxes with Earth Dragon, which scares everyone, as they don't feel worthy of such a gift, even suspecting he might be up to something. The next day, he convinces them to take the boxes, but instead of saying it's a gift, he asks them to keep it for now. The girls were crying as they saw them leave, but Alma encourages them to go feed the horses. Meanwhile, Diaz goes to check on the garden, but unfortunately, the plants have grown dry. Diaz suspects the soil needs more time, so he'll try again the next day, but again they come out dry. So now he tries adding more fertilizer, but they still come out dry. Alda tells him to stop and rest, reminding him it's impossible to cultivate in this prairie. Given that, Diaz gets up accepting this and goes to do other things, but the girls, hearing this, express their desire to help him, though they don't know how until they hear someone calling for help and see the good mouse among the boxes, which seems to have been trapped for at least a week. Upon listening more closely to his voice, the twins decide to help. Senai asks Jean to help lift the sacks on top of the box. From inside, the little mouse hears a small thud and asks them with concern if they are okay. After a few seconds, the box lid opens and the little mouse can see the twins. Relieved to see the outside, she starts crying, thanking them for saving her. The little ones greet her and introduce themselves with their names. The little mouse does the same, introducing herself as a member of the jumping ear mouse race, Aimer Jerry Bauer, and clarifies that although she doesn't look it, she is an adult woman. Over there, praising her beautiful glasses, the little mouse thanks her, mentioning she made them herself, along with the book she carries to study. The twins are amazed, but then ask her why she was locked in that box if she was being punished. Aimer replies no, but some members of her group wanted to harm Mr. Diaz, and she got caught up in it. One of the twins asks if she's friends with Diaz. Aimer says no, since she's never spoken to him. Also, she hasn't been able to leave since she arrived. Given that, the twins ask her for advice about a secret Diaz and the others can't know. After they tell her everything, Aimer tries to understand, asking if they are from the forest people. The twins confirm this, and Aimer asks if it's true that the forest people live in it, protect it, and become part of it. The twins confirm, and showing her a seed from their necklace, explain that when one of their own is about to die, they deposit their power and knowledge into a seed for their loved ones to protect and nurture, forming a forest, and when the tree grows, it becomes a kind of gravestone. By touching it, they can feel the emotions of the deceased and gain knowledge as if from a book. Aimer also remembers that the forest people give their mana to protect those trees, to speed up plant growth, and the power to create barriers that keep diseases and miasma away. The twins confirm everything and congratulate her for knowing so much. That said, they mention that since they aren't adults yet, they can only germinate seeds and create small barriers. But humans can't know this, as it was the last promise they made to their parents. Trying to understand, Aimer asks why they live with Mr. Diaz. The twins reveal that at first they aimed to keep their promise, thinking of escaping, but over time they grew fond of him because of his kindness, even though they dislike his bad smell. Despite all this, they still love him and the others, so they don't want to leave. They also mention that recently Diaz started working to cultivate the garden, but he's not getting results, as something is draining the soil's energy, and to prevent that, a barrier is needed. Seeing their dilemma, Aimer advises them to make the barrier at night so no one discovers them, and to ensure it goes well, she'll wake them and guide them in the dark. The twins cheer with excitement, but Aimer wonders if it will really go well. Yes, it probably won't. That night, Aimer leaves the house to get water from the river. After refreshing herself, she approaches the house and sees a cut made by Zenai and Jean. Inside, she finds Diaz and the whole family asleep. Aimer sneaks through the cut and finally meets Diaz, the famous dragon slayer. The mouse knows that even the slightest noise could give him away, but as the sisters told her, Diaz smells strongly of sweat, and she almost screams in disgust. Slowly, she approaches the sisters and whispers that she's here for them to go to the garden. The sisters struggle to wake up, but eventually they get up half asleep. Once outside, Aimer notices they seem strange and asks if something happened, as the sisters are scared to go out at night, so when they need to use the bathroom, they go with Diaz and Alna. Aimer understands their fear, and that a little mouse doesn't provide much security, but then each sees the seed and mentions their father and mother for courage. They both hold hands and move forward without fear of the dark. This is how they reach the garden, and the sisters ask Aimer to wait a moment. Kneeling in the dirt, they hold the medallions with both hands and recite a spell that sounds like a song. Aimer watches from afar as the sisters shine, and a green capsule grows nearby until it expands throughout the garden. The medallions begin to glow and rise, while the sisters recite with much more devotion, and Aimer, from a distance, admires how beautiful the sight is. The sisters are about to finish the chant, and the green capsule starts to fade. When they finish, they stand up and leave the garden, grabbing Aimer and telling her they've completed the barrier. On their way back home, they mention that doing this makes them very sleepy, and Aimer comments that she's happy they finished the job. However, she didn't expect the sisters to forget to let her go and take her to sleep at the house. And yes, the poor little mouse pleads to be let go, because they'll get discovered. That same night, we shift to the city ruled by Eldan, where we see many semi-humans living peacefully. In a restaurant, we meet a group of friends. The lion tells us that Mr. Eldan is about to go to the royal capital to give the king a magical earth dragon stone that Diaz had gifted him, and with this, they can recognize Eldan as the Lord of Gazdex, making this place safer for semi-humans. They also heard another rumor that Diaz is married to a semi-human and shows it publicly. The wolf confirms this, saying his brother is one of Gamalaz's guards. The deer wonders if Diaz isn't from the east, since those from that area hate semi-humans. One comments that it seems Diaz fell in love at first sight, which is why he made her his wife. Yes, something like that happened. They even heard that the semi-human has horns, which makes Leon think Diaz married a horned creature. This seems crazy to the group, but what stands out is that Diaz is looking for subjects regardless of their race. Many people who went there saw the sign, which only required them not to be bad or criminal, and Diaz would provide shelter and food. Now, that's a great offer. They also mention the attack by the big-eared mice, saying someone sent them, as they confess to being instigated by someone from the monkey race. The wolf suspects they might have lied, but there were more accusations about a monkey man dressed in clothes. By the way, a hooded man was listening to all this, and upon hearing it, leaves the place. When he reaches an alley, we discover he's the same resentful noble, and upon finding out the mice failed, he becomes frustrated. Just then, a purple-haired woman appears offering her services, but the noble grabs her by the neck and yells for her to leave. The woman runs off scared, leaving the noble behind, who curses Diaz for leaving him like this. Meanwhile, at the city entrance, the guards talk about the new lord in Kastek. One of them mentions that things will get tough for the second Prince Mazer, and the other agrees, noting that the previous lord of Kastek controlled trade in the west and enriched Prince Mazer. The first guard also mentions that Prince Eldan, who succeeded him, seeks to distance himself from Prince Mazer, raising doubts about who will take the throne, whether it will be Prince Richard or one of the three princesses. Speaking of them, a guard rushes in, distressed, saying that Princess Diane left the capital leading a large group of soldiers. The second guard reassures him, saying it's common. However, the soldier clarifies that she left with nearly 200 soldiers and wagons of supplies. The second guard advises him to just let it go and say nothing. The next day, Alma wakes everyone up with a loud shout. Diaz asks what's wrong, and she points to the twins, asking why there's a mouse with them. Without listening, she takes them to bathe, and as she does, the twins complain. Zenai asks him why he's doing this. Alma explains that mice carry deadly diseases. Aimer is also in a bucket, apologizing for being so deadly, but Alma ignores him and yells that he better wash himself. After this, the three are forced to sit as punishment. Diaz watches with a smile, thinking it's a good experience, though he feels a bit curious about the little mouse. Just then, one of the elderly women appears, calling our protagonist to show him something. When they reach the garden, they discover that many of the plants have grown in a perfect circle. Alma is thrilled to see this, and congratulates Diaz for his unwavering determination. Diaz feels calm seeing the garden worked, but he's even happier to see Alma's joy. Later, while our protagonist is busy, a pigeon lands on the box he's holding and greets him. Diaz is shocked to see the bird speak. The pigeon calms him down and introduces itself as Garand, saying it serves Lord Eldan as the chief messenger. Diaz asks if it's a semi-human, and Gerard replies that yes, it's from the Pigeon Man race. Diaz apologizes for being so rude. Gerard reassures him and gets straight to the point, saying he came to deliver a letter from Lord Eldan, as it's an urgent matter. Diaz stares at the briefcase, seemingly expecting the worst, but it's just because he's waiting for the pigeon to open it. When the letter is out, he reads what happened. Eldan mentions that the small dogmen are very interested in becoming his subjects and asks him to consider accepting them into his kingdom. After finishing the letter, Diaz asks Jiran what the small races are. The pigeon explains that among dogmen there are large and small races. The large ones tend to be strong and resemble humans. In contrast, the small ones look more like the original species and have the same strength or are weaker, Plus, due to their pads, they can be clumsier. He also mentions that many learned he was looking for subjects because a large dog came to the village of Iluk, so now many want to come here. Diaz understands everything and replies that if the village agrees, he will accept them, asking Jiran to wait while he goes to ask. However, as he leaves, he notices the pigeon staring intently at the beans, so he offers some while he waits. Back home, the sisters react very happily to the news and get excited about having puppies. Diaz mentions he's still struggling to decide. Anna tells him that after giving it away, she can't do it this time. Diaz asks for a moment to talk, and outside the house, he asks if the sisters have said anything. Anna says they seem regretful, but still won't say why they slept hugging the mouse. Diaz thinks they must have their reasons and hopes they'll share them someday. Getting back to the point, he asks her what she thinks about accepting more subjects, since her opinion matters to him. Yes, what a good husband. Anna replies to do what he thinks is best, as her duty is to support him in what he finds important. Diaz understands but asks her to share anything that might worry her, as she is the person he trusts most. Alda interrupts, saying she's the best wife of all. Diaz first thinks about how much she's helped him, as without her, he wouldn't know where to start, and now she also protects their family. After this, Ameo begs Diaz to let him live here. Diaz sees no problem but asks why he wants to live in Iluk. As Eldon is about to reclaim his home, Aimer replies that he wants to be with Senai and Ion, eager to see their powers grow. He can read, write, and do math, so he can help as a tutor or with other tasks. Diaz first looks at Alna, who only sets the rule to keep it clean. With this approved, Diaz sends a message to Eldon that they approve the small breed dogs and that Aimer will stay with them. The dove flies off, and that night, Alma wakes Diaz because many beings are approaching. On the way, she mentions they could be the dog men, as she senses one and several small ones, but there's another that is immensely large, and she doesn't know what it is until they see them. A whole horde of small dogs, a large breed dog woman, and a giant anaconda. However, the latter is a monster. Alna looks for her bow but realizes she forgot it. The anaconda swallows a dog, and Diaz, without any weapon, runs to confront the anaconda. As he gets close, Diaz stuns the anaconda with a slap. Yes, a slap, then squeezes its neck until he kills it, just like that. Anna runs over, upset that he faced it unarmed, but she also takes the blame for going out without her bow. Diaz apologizes, saying he got overconfident and will be more careful. Meanwhile, the semi-humans ask the dog they ate if it's okay, and they see it come out unscathed from the anaconda's mouth. The semi-human thanks them for saving it. That's when Alma introduces herself as Diaz's wife, and the other dogs comment that she's a very young and pretty wife, so yes, he landed a great catch, which makes Alma very happy. Just look at her face. Alma and Diaz kneel to welcome them, surprising the semi-human, and all the dogs are glad to be received well. The semi-human introduces herself as Canis, who didn't come to move in but to care for the small breeds at Eldon's request, and has only accompanied them. She tells them that 3 clans are moving in, the Taibe Masti, a strong and brave clan. Their leader introduces himself as Marth Taibe Masti and has great respect for Diaz. The other clan is the Basenji, a clan with very firm values. Their leader is named Sidorio Basenji, and the last clan is the Ausen Ship, quite curious, as their leader is named Rin Hearth God of Yan and Ship. Yes, I hope I pronounced it right, but they can call him Ship. He doesn't tell Diaz that he already evaluated their souls, and surprisingly, Canis is white while the clans are deep blue. Finally, Canis mentions they love to work and won't sit still for anything. Diaz tells everyone there's a lot of work to do, like building the pond, taking care of the animals, and being soldiers of the domain. Everyone cheers, but Canis asks if being soldiers means they'll have to fight. Diaz replies yes, but mostly they'll be on night watch and practice for battle. Canis mentions that everyone is good for simple tasks, but their paws can't wield weapons, and their height puts them at a disadvantage. Diaz reassures her not to worry, and since Canis will stay for a while to see how things go, he invites her to see how he will change his mind. Upon arriving in the village, they meet Klaus, who has been on guard until they return. Diaz introduces Canis, but as Klaus introduces himself, he notices Canis is very pretty and gets nervous around her. After this, Diaz takes her to see the village. On the way, Ala notices Klaus's gaze and realizes he's in love. As days pass, the dogmen settled well in the village, even helping with daily tasks. While Diaz observed how calm everything was, we switch to Klaus, who is training them. When Klaus gives the order to attack, the Pharaoh men immediately rush at him, and with almost perfect teamwork, they knock him to the ground. Seeing this, Klaus praises them for improving their reflexes. As Diaz watches, he remembers how Klaus used to defeat generals, earning the nickname the Head Collector. So, seeing him defeated is surprising, especially since it only took them 10 days. Canis also watches in amazement. Diaz tells him that during the war, the enemy's military dogs caused many problems. He sees they have similar skills, but that's not enough. They can also talk, so exceptional performance is expected. They can even use tools well if modified a bit, meaning they have no trouble with daily tasks and guard duties. With all this said, he asks Canis if she's convinced. Canis enthusiastically replies yes, and Diaz says goodbye to get back to work. As he leaves, Canis hears a cry of pain. Turning around, he sees a dogman is injured. Klaus immediately goes to help, and the dog explains he tripped over a stone. Klaus uses the cloth from his staff to cover the wound. Kanye approaches to help, which Klaus appreciates. While treating the pain, she confesses to Klaus that she's surprised, as no human has ever tried so hard to heal a dogman. Klaus, being a man, tells her it doesn't matter. After all, a comrade got hurt because he was careless. Yes, Klaus is quite the charmer. Now we move to the tomb of the founding king in the kingdom of Sans Serif. There, Princess Diane arrives, escorted by her men, and looking at all the treasures, she orders them to be used as war funds. In that, she also finds the royal scepter, which she observes obsessively. Suddenly, one of her escorts asks what she plans to do with the scepter. Diane replies that she will use it, which worries the soldier, as she could face punishment for coming to a forbidden place and taking a national treasure. Tien exclaims that won't happen. After all, she plans to eliminate a traitor, namely Diaz, who mocked them with his lies. She plans to defeat him with that scepter, with which the ancient founding king turned 1,000 enemies to ashes. After all this, she will use the hidden fortune and dragon materials to finance an army, to eliminate her annoying sisters, and finally seize the kingdom. Turning to the soldier named Prynesia, she tells her not to worry so much and, pulling out a ring, says she has a secret plan with it. Prynesia recognizes the object as the king's seal, and Diana remembers the words of that man in the village. Furious, she declares it's time to seek justice for all those people. The noble scoundrel listened to all this from outside, boasting about how easy it was to deceive that princess. It turns out she has a perfect plan. Her goal is for Diana to eliminate Diaz, so he can deal with Diana and make his father proud, especially that person. At night, Prince Richard holds a meeting with his associates, including Prynesia, who reports everything Diane has done. Having fulfilled her duty, Richard tells her to leave. Prynesia agrees, ready to stay undercover. Richard tells her it's no longer necessary. Just wait for his next instructions. The High Command is aware that the princess stole the scepter and the king's seal, so they ask Prince Richard what he will do. He decides not to intervene, as following her would mean confronting Diaz. The others comment that he has insisted a lot on not associating with Diaz, so he tells them that this man is not only the kingdom's savior, but also known as Diaz the Saint and Diaz the Castrator. Yes, quite a nickname, but let me explain why. These nicknames originated during the war. The king ordered the elimination of enemy citizens, but Diaz refused to obey and did not let any soldier harm civilians, leading them to conclude that Diaz can ignore the king. As for Diaz the Castrator, Richard corrects the nickname to Diaz the Eunuch. He recounts that there was a unit formed by a noble's son who wanted to gain prestige on the battlefield. This son only joined to take advantage of the chaos, but Diaz arrived, captured 3 people, and interrogated the noble's son. Due to his stupid answer, Diaz castrated him with his foot. One present asks if attacking a noble isn't a crime, and Richard confirms it. Diaz was interrogated, but his response was that nobles protect those who cannot defend themselves, and from what he saw, that man was no noble. The king praised his answer and said he did the right thing, so Diaz's judgment was annulled. We're also told that the army captains spoke on his behalf, as they cannot lose such a valuable soldier as Diaz. Richard notes that Deus will confront whatever he feels is unjust, regardless of whether it's a noble or royal family, because he also has history with them. We're told that once a spoiled child did whatever he wanted. This child wanted to become a man on the battlefield, but ended up surrounded by enemies and was captured until a giant man ran to save him and then hit the child on the head for such stupidity. That was the first and last time Richard was hit. He tried to intimidate Diaz by claiming he was a prince, but instead of apologizing, Diaz sent him home. When Richard refused, Diaz trained him for 3 months without mercy. Thanks to Diaz, Richard became an honorable, hardworking man who doesn't look down on anyone. This is why the king values him so much, but they wonder why he was sent so far away. Richard explains he wasn't exiled. The king trusted Diaz to somehow become his first line of defense. During the war, Diaz resolved many of the king's disasters, so he sees him as a savior and a great friend. However, the reason Diane arrived empty-handed in that plane might be the Prince Mazer's fault, the most corrupt of them all. With that, he hands Nereus a bag of money and instructs him to bring Diane and the king's seal before she meets Diaz, but if he happens to run into him, he must give him half the money. Now we move to the feudal lord's mansion, Kazdex's domain. Eldon receives a visit from Diane and her men, who, without wasting time, tells him she plans to eliminate the traitor Diaz, confiscate his assets, and use them for the good of her kingdom. But since some of her soldiers deserted, she needs his cooperation. Eldon is stunned to hear this and demands proof that Diaz is a traitor. Diaz shows him the royal order, pointing out that it's sealed by his majesty. We switch to Diaz, who was testing a new invention when he sees Geraint. He asks what's going on, and the dove informs him that there's a message from Lord Eldon. We return to Eldon and his men, who are in a meeting to decide what to do, as they are legally bound to cooperate with a royal order. Eldon orders them to buy as much time as possible, as he won't allow someone as kind as Diaz to be involved in the capital's absurd power struggle, especially since they are currently preparing gardens in their plain, which would benefit them in the long run. Just then, Geraint arrives with Diaz's response. Eldon rushes to read it, discovering that Diaz ordered them to cooperate with Diane, a response that confuses everyone present. In the afternoon, while everyone prepared for battle, Klaus speaks privately with Canis to say goodbye, whispering the forbidden words, "I swear I will return. Wait for me, please." Klaus, in tears, promises he will, and then wishes him good luck. The next day, Diaz, Klaus, Aymer, and the dogmen await the arrival of the enemy troops. Klaus uses his spyglass to confirm their arrival, discovering an uncountable number of troops led by Diane. Diaz observes with complete calm, able only to say, "It's time." But, well, if you've made it this far, comment the word soldier to let me know you reached the end. Here on screen, I'll leave you these two cool videos, just like the person watching this video. See you next time. Take care, drink water, bathe, and bye-bye.